Well, good morning, Ashley, and good morning, Tim. Today we are discussing something really exciting, ACI's first podcast, and it's called the Outdoor Communicators. So please share with me, what can the listeners expect?
Yeah, hi Blake and Ashley. It's good to see both of you. As
Hey,
far as
Tim.
the Outdoor Communicators podcast, I think this is not going to be a true crime podcast. It's not going to be This American Life. What it is, and I think what people can expect really, is a good ongoing conversation about the work we do every day as outdoor communicators, as communicators that are focused on conservation. What we set out to accomplish is extending the conversations that occur during our ACI conferences every year. They're often very good. They help us grow, as communicators. And we wanted to kind of take that and continue it throughout the year so that we're kind of up on what's changing, what's happening in the world of social media, video, of, writing press releases, graphic arts, these things that we do. The world is very dynamic. It's changing. And sometimes the conversations that happen from one ACI conference to the next, things have totally changed. And Ashley and I felt like we could kind of have that conversation ongoing throughout the year. And I think that's really what you can expect, is a good conversation with luminaries around ACI and even outside of ACI who can really help us continue to grow our craft and, improve what we do every day. Ashley?
Tim approached me and asked me, it was his idea, so I got to give him credit for it. But then he
Mhm.
approached me and asked me if I wanted to help because I do Nevada Department of Wildlife's podcast. And I almost feel selfish every week because I'm just like, what do I want to know? Even when we come up with topics, it helps me in my position, and I know it helps other communicators. So it's been really fun picking the topics, just figuring out, what questions do I have? So it's been awesome. And I appreciate Tim for asking me to be part of it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to follow along on the journey with this podcast. And ACI members such as ourselves, our jobs cover a wide spectrum of skill sets. Whether you work for a state agency, an NGO, a tribal nation, or at the federal level, we pretty much run the gamut of conservation communication. So share with me what types of topics will be discussed on the Outdoor Communicators.
Yeah, really, you could look at almost any communications department across that spectrum you just referred to. People doing communications around conservation at any of those levels, tribal, state, federal, all the different partners that are part of ACI. We share a lot in common. We do a lot of different things within that, and that communication is fairly broad. You've got video, you've got again, you've got a writing focus, you've got marketing, you've got PR, you've got, podcast, social media, all these different fields. And sometimes one person is doing all of that. I think Ashley can attest to that. She does a lot of different things for Nevada. And then other shops have different people for each of those jobs. And I think that, the topics that we're going to focus on really mirror what we do every day, So we're starting off with an episode that is featuring Sarah Sutherland from your shop, Blake. Sarah is viewed as a leader in social media broadly, not just even within the conservation realm. She's very well known and celebrated outside that. And so, Ashley and I wanted to have a chat with her about what's happening in the world of social media. And, kind of if you were to peek into the future, what would you see? And then I'll let Ashley talk about the next topic after that a little bit because she put that one together.
Yeah, so Faith Jolly with Utah Department of Wildlife, she did a great presentation at the last ACI on crisis communications. So, of course, being a PIO, I was telling her that's something you always prepare for, but you don't deal with it every day. So that was something I wanted to learn more about. So again, I'm being selfish. I think of the topics I want to learn more about in my position. So we reached out to Faith, and she gave us a great podcast, just all the tips on crisis communications. And then so far we've had another guest. Tim, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So we knew we couldn't get through the first few episodes without having the legendary Jennifer Wisniewski talking about marketing. Marketing's a big important part of what we do, and one of the things that I had questioned is when I started in conservation communication, marketing was a prohibited word. You couldn't say it, and Jennifer really broke down the history of that for us. So really, that's the first 3 episodes. Beyond that, really what we want to do is continue to cover the things that we do every day: video, graphic design. We want to get into kind of the heart of the communications realm that we work in. And then beyond that, we'd really like to explore topics of interest to other people around ACI. And so, please feel free to email Ashley or myself with your ideas, your requests. We're going to hopefully do one of these a month between the conferences. And we'd like to actually tape quite a few of these at the conference with folks from around ACI, maybe some of the guest speakers that are there. And then periodically, we want to plug in people even outside of our particular realm to bring in fresh new ideas.
We've had a lot of fun learning through these podcasts. So if there is a topic, we want everyone to take advantage of this. So if there is a topic you want to hear about, let us know. Also, we want people to be sharing it with their leadership. There's a lot of people who don't know what we do as communicators. So this is an awesome way to be sharing what we do within our agencies.
Podcasts have been around for decades, and their popularity has exploded over the past 10 or so years. So why is this the right time for ACI to enter the game, if you will?
Yeah, I guess my thoughts on that are that this is an interesting time for podcasts. Like you said, they have been around for a while. We've seen sort of everything go sky high in popularity, like the true crime podcasts, and every new television show that comes out has an accompanying podcast. But one of the things that I think has become stronger and stronger within organizations, either a business or like ACI, is what's referred to as an internal podcast. And this is a podcast that tends to focus on information that goes out to people who have who work in communications and conservation. And so, this podcast is a bit of a blend of two things: a conversational format, one that does tie into a particular interest, but we're also going to launch it broadly, so it's not just limited to ACI, in the hopes that it might find some interest beyond that. But podcasting is evolving. Audio shows are becoming more and more popular. The formats are changing broadly and widely. And I think the thing that we're looking at with this is, it's a contextual tool that allows us to really take, again, some of those magic moments from our conferences that are limited by the number of days we have to be together and extend them throughout the year. And so I think that's really where podcasting shines. It's just a great way to continue those conversations.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a tool that, a lot of our state agencies are all using podcasts now, so we know it works. You could provide a lot more context with a podcast, and people are usually listening to them while doing other things like driving or cleaning. So you have someone's ear a long time with podcasting. So it's this tool we have. We know it works. Why not use it?
And you both obviously have experience in this podcast space. So please, if you don't mind, share with me your background, each of you, in communications and media, and how podcasting has been a part of your lives and your professional careers.
Yeah, so I actually have, like many of us in ACI, I come from that world that I have that journalist background. I was in the news world. And then I wanted something, I guess news kind of freaked me out because you never knew where you were going to be a year into the future. It was kind of stressful, and I was kind of ready to settle down somewhere. So I found my job. I have family here in Reno. and I came to the Nevada Department of Wildlife, where I'm the public information officer. And right when I got here, they're like, we have this podcast and we want you to take it over. So I started podcasting, and what I started to notice, they thought I had the news background. So they're like, you know how to do these interviews, but this is a completely different type of interview than I'm used to. It's long, it's 30 minutes or sometimes more. But what I started to notice is every time I did a podcast, I'm supposed to be the agency's communicator, the person who tells the public what we do. And each podcast, I learn something more about our agency, and I have to give the podcast credit. That's how I've been able to do my job as a public information officer, is just what I've learned through the podcast. So I've been here for the last 7 years, and that whole time I've been the co-host of the Nevada Department of Wildlife's podcast. And every episode I learn something new, just like with the ACI podcast.
That's awesome.
How about
Yeah, that's very similar. I came from a news background. As a young journalist, I just saw myself, beelining straight for the New York Times. That was my goal, was to be a writer at the New York Times. And then my career sidetracked completely, partially because of technology. They trained me to do video at one of my first newspaper jobs, and that led to working in television news. And then from there, I was like, well, I've already got, newspapers. Now I've got television. Why not have radio too, right? Kind of the media slam. And so I went to work for Chicago Public Radio, which is really where I learned about podcasts. I got to work with This American Life and Wait, Don't Tell Me. And it was very eye-opening to me. I learned at that time that podcasting was, it was huge in urban centers, huge in places where people were commuting. And I was like, man, this is a fantastic, tool. It's storytelling. It's casual storytelling. And people seem to really, really like it. And so, I at that point, I got into it, ended up coming to work very, very much like Ashley. I had been laid off at a couple of jobs and decided that my family needed more than that. And so I took a job at the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And, honestly, during the pandemic, I got really tired of sort of the social backlash and the anger and, people frustrated at having to be at home. And so I thought, why not start a podcast? So we started the Beaver State podcast at that point in time, not really very similar time frame to Ashley's podcast. And so we've kind of grown these together. We've actually been able to podcast together, take our two podcasts, join them together at a bear workshop a couple of years ago, which was fantastic. And I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with Ashley at that time. And I thought, it'd be fun to kind of maybe continue this. Our states border each other. I'm down in Tahoe quite often, or in Reno. And so it's been fun. It's been fun to work with Ashley on this.
It's been fun working with you too, Tim. I really enjoyed it.
So obviously you both host your own podcast, and now you're co-hosting the Outdoor Communicators, the ACI podcast. What is it that you enjoy most about hosting a podcast? What kind of drives you when pursuing a story?
I think, Ashley kind of nailed it on the head a couple of questions ago. It's getting to ask those questions, just letting your curiosity kind of fly. A lot of times we'll have a preset of questions, but then something will come up and it's just like, and you get this like fresh bit of information, new perspective, new idea, something new to try. And for me, it's really, I'm a very curious person, and getting to sit down with luminaries and really get at what makes them tick, and get it, in our particular podcast, it's you're learning a lot of science, you're learning a lot of biology, and in order to be good at my job, again, Ashley hit on this already, getting to get that information through asking biologists questions in sort of a safe space of a podcast, where I can play a little bit dumb and say, hey, you got to explain that to me. I don't understand that concept. It's very, very valuable. And it's been, for me, that's been really great. And one of my favorite parts of hosting a podcast.
I have to agree with Tim. I love learning, and I also love getting to know people within my agency and now with ACI. And I've loved it over the years. I told you how my podcast has helped me do my job here. And now just by learning so much, and now we get to learn from other communicators, and that's also going to benefit all of us. So learning, getting to know people and hearing their stories. I love the podcasts that get really personal, like not just about what they do, but when we really get to know them. And one last thing I love about the podcast, I guess you asked for what is our favorite thing, but I have multiple favorite things, is I actually have a lot of freedom over the podcast. So I like just being able to come and be myself and talk to people rather than on social media when we're trying to use the department's voice. So I don't know. Those are some of my favorite things.
Yeah, that's great. And with all the hundreds of talented people that we have in our ACI ranks, I can only imagine you will not have a shortage of premium content to choose from, will you?
Oh, there's so many great, again, I call them luminaries, but, just people with fantastic ideas, people that are trying new things. We might not share geographical boundaries, but we all do a lot of the same thing, even if we're talking about different wildlife species or, again, geography. But man, there are just so many great ideas. And again, I hear them during the conference, but it's like you come home and you get back into the swing of things, and maybe some of those go out the window. I'm not great at taking notes. And so being able to continue those conversations is just super valuable because there's so many great people at ACI.
And one benefit of the ACI podcast is we have personalities. Sometimes that's a little harder when, as we all know, working with biologists, but with this ACI podcast, all of our guests have been great so far. Super dynamic people.
So true.
A communicator's dream, really. Every single guest we've had.
So in theory, you could have a podcast every day, but I know that's not possible. So how many episodes can we expect in a year, and where can listeners find the Outdoor Communicators podcast?
Yeah, so really, again, Ashley and I both do podcasts, and we're busy people. So what we wanted to do was not take on a bunch more work. We wanted this to be valuable to us as creators. And so we've decided to do one episode a month, really kind of launching in January this month, and going through the ACI conference next July, and where we'll be recording more episodes for the future. So that's kind of the goal right now. We're probably going to have, each episode is going to be anywhere from half an hour, 45 minutes. And then we may have additional content that people can, because oftentimes our conversations go longer than that. And it's often really good stuff. So we want to keep the podcast manageable, but give you all that extra content. So really one a month for now is what we're looking at. And where you can find it is you'll be able to find it on the ACI website. That's one place you can find each new episode. And the other place you'll be able to find is really anywhere you get your podcast currently. Could be Apple Podcasts, could be Google Play, Podbean. There's a bunch of services out there. We are going to be hosted by Libsyn, which is a really good podcast host, and they distribute to all those channels. If you can't find it on your own particular, favorite place to get your podcast, let me know. I can go in through Libsyn and set that up. So there'll be a lot of different places to find it. I'm sure we'll probably have excerpts on some of the social media, the ACI social media as well.
Very good. And before we part ways to actually tend to our jobs that pay the bills, is there any last thoughts you would like to share with our audience?
I just say, just listen to one podcast and you'll be hooked. It really is. Like Tim says, it's just a great way for us to stay connected past the conference. We get such a short amount of time at the conference, and it is my favorite conference I go to out of the year because, like I said before, we're surrounded by people who are like us, who are fellow communicators. Nothing against our biologists, just people at ACI are a little more my speed. And I just think people are going to love this podcast.
I was just going to say, one thing I learned in Chicago, working with some of the best podcasters in the world, was, why they're so popular, why people like podcasts. And what I came to learn is that podcasting is it's the conversation. A lot of times people want to be in a conversation, even if they can't speak into the conversation. They want to hear it. They want to know what's going on. Somebody once told me that it's like sitting on somebody's shoulder, listening in, and humans really want that. They need that. And so I think that's one thing that this podcast will hopefully be. I'm hoping Ashley and I will channel a lot of your questions, your interests, the things that you want to know about improving as a communicator. Because, a lot of it is just based on our curiosities and the things we deal with every day. So really want to kind of build that. And then you already have that magic that a podcast is, which is just listening in on a good conversation.
Well, I'm really excited to see how this podcast evolves over time. And I do appreciate you both joining me today to talk about the Outdoor Communicators, ACI's first podcast. This is really exciting, and I look forward to following along with you both on this journey. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Blake.